Today I want to talk about my first experiences when, well, after I started working with God and allowing myself to feel with His hands or see with His eyes. At that time, still, that was before the time I told a few recordings ago when I said, I had this experience with Christ telling me that I turned away from Him and turned to Buddhism because I turned away from Him. That was even quite a time before that. My journey with God was a gradual one, and He guided me through many, many stages and steps to learn basically how it is with Him and without Him, and why certain things we do are not so good. Back then, all those years ago, over 10 years ago, I was still, I kind of stopped practicing Buddhism as such, but I still listened to my Buddhist chants. I had quite a few CDs where I had Buddhist chants of the Dalai Lama and other monks. And I started to feel, when I listened to these things, that they did not have the lightness and the liveliness that I feel with God's presence. It did not have the purity of the energies that come with Christ. Basically, it was not alive, it was not vibrant, it was not intelligent, it was not responsive. The energies that I felt of the Dalai Lama's tapes, it felt more dark. If I had to describe it with a color, it would be like a grey, black, smoky.
Messenger, now, Cassie Favaro, to your group. Hi, I'm planning on calling you guys on Sunday. Thank you for all the healing and thinking of us.
Sorry. So, it had more this dark, if it had a color, the dark, grey, black, color, and it would not be like the velvety blackness that people describe when they, go towards God, but actually it was rather a stagnant energy. It was not malleable, and it felt quite foreboding. And whatever the prayers said, it felt more like a structure, like a rigid structure, rather than the flowiness of true Christian prayers. When I hear true Christian prayers, it feels, it comes, it rains upon you, it washes you, cleanses you, like you ask from your heart and then comes to you. Whereas when I listen to the Buddhist prayer, it was more like a structure, like when you look at an exercise book, the little squares or the lines of a math exercise book or a writing exercise book. It felt rigid, and I started feeling uncomfortable. And when I listened to those tapes, I felt almost like God's energy that I have, or God's presence, but almost like step a little bit away to let me feel again that which was there, which is the truth of, let's say, the true energy of Tibetan Buddhism. So over time, I threw away these tapes. And at that time, or some months ago when I started doing that, I have met the Dalai Lama again in Edinburgh. I had met him many times in Japan, and also had met him before I started working with God when I lived in the Tibetan monastery. And the last time I met him, I started my journey with God, and I was actually shocked. Sorry, I'm moving about here, I don't know about the picture, but I was actually shocked. What I did feel is that his energy was definitely powerful, and there was a centeredness in his energies, but I could feel that foreboding presence, which I can only describe as satanic presence, and that the energy, yes, there was a kind of peacefulness and a focusedness of him, but the kind of peacefulness was more like a trained peacefulness rather than the absolute, the God's peace feels like it's like a living characteristics of him. It is a living presence that changes things in you and transforms, but it's not like a stagnant way of, was about to say imposing, like imposing itself over things, which I more felt with the Dalai Lama at that time. And I felt like the energy that was around him, that dark energy, that has the quality of making things stick. So all the love that surrounded him, and I felt like that was not a living love like you feel with God, but rather it was a love that was given to him by others. So like he cloaked himself in energies of people that basically goes with him. And I was quite really, really surprised, negatively. I thought, oh my God, this is what I have liked and kind of almost worshipped in the past. And at the same time, when he was in Edinburgh, there was one of the big concert halls in the Usher Hall, a little like a cultural program, for him. And I was there as well, and I could still always feel that foreboding presence, that almost like a manipulative presence lurking. And I was quite surprised feeling that. And that slowly made me question about Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism especially, which I will probably talk about later in other contexts. And some years ago, no, that was 2 or 3 years ago, I was in the airport in London coming home from a short stay at the Greek Orthodox monastery. The guy who helped me in the airport, I could immediately feel, oh, that is a Buddhist. But I was aware, again, there was a kind of peace about him and a kind of, the compassion that I felt of him. I felt it wasn't the compassion that's given to you with God's grace, which is like a living, happy, peaceful presence that offers itself to you as a gift, but rather that kind of love and compassion of that guy felt more like a trained one, and I don't know how else to explain it. And he also had that cloak of that sticky energy with him, that kind of holds on to energy that is not his, basically like recycled energies. And deep within him, in his center, I felt a very foreboding presence, I would say almost like a demon, that settled in him. And when I was in the aircraft flying home, I could feel that sticky energy that stuck to me. Yeah, sticky energy stuck to me. That felt, is that again, that foreboding, I call satanic presence quality. And I had to actually ask the Christ to cleanse that off me. So that is basically my experience of Buddhism. Or the Buddhist energy, or whatever you want to call it, once I started walking with God. The next thing I experienced is when I went to visit Japan for the last time. I had the same awareness when I walked around there was a part where my friend lived and where I also used to live, where there was lots of Buddhist temples. And I again felt that foreboding presence, that energy that is not really a protection, it's more like a cloak that is stagnant, rigid, like a wall. Whereas when you get protection by God, it is more like a living presence, which is malleable, happy, joyful. It is alive. Whereas the energies of those Buddhist temples was that rigid, again, that foreboding and heavy presence. And the same when I walked by the Shinto shrines, I realized that these, whatever deities the people work with, ask for things and success and whatever, are actually quite, is malevolent the right word? Bad, mischievous and cheeky beings who will at some point make you pay the price for what you've asked for them, if you do get what you wanted. But even if you don't get what you wanted, the fact that you called upon them will make you pay, will have an influence on you. They set themselves into your aura and start taking your energy and taking and getting from you when it is their wish, when they need or want. Another thing that I experienced back in Japan is something that they call the Butsudang, which is like a little altar, a little shrine in which into which they invite the spirit of the dead person, let's say mama, father, or even older, or even just the Buddha, and they offer them every day before you eat, or even every meal, tea and food, apart from the mice loving it, and they pray, over them. I don't know if they pray for keeping the family in peace or trying to please you so that you protect the family, you meaning the dead person. And I just felt that was so wrong. They trap these beings in the house. Suppose it is the dead person, it could even be other beings, I don't know what they invite, but that you should never, this is so wrong, that these beings are not set free, and that at one point these, if it was your mom or dad, if you keep holding on to them, they will actually start draining your energy, because they need life force, the true living life force that they are not given. Once they have left their body, they have to go back to God, and then through God's permission, get the right energy supplies to come back to earth or go somewhere else. But people, by doing this practice, is in any religion and tradition where people do ancestor worship and ancestor cults, is actually very, very damaging for the people themselves who have deceased, for yourself, and for the whole development and progress of the nation. I had forgotten to say, so in all those years, or back those years, I had practiced my shiatsu, which I had a 3-year complete training here at Edinburgh. I practiced my shiatsu in a shamanic center, which was it was a good idea, if only it hadn't been run by shamans. You could do your therapies there in the mornings. It was for people who had low income, so they would come and get whatever they needed. And then you could also find your own clients, either the same people who you saw in the mornings, or strangers. And in the afternoons, after the center has closed, you could use the rooms to work and build your clientele. So the idea was actually quite a nice idea. But when I went there to do my shiatsu, I had a few surprises. So first of all, as you know, in shamanic practices, people have these smudge sticks, the sage, and God knows what's in there, where people believe that you use them to cleanse yourself. And you know what actually happens with those? And I saw that when God showed me, these smudge sticks create a fog, like a spiritual mental fog, that lays itself and sticks to your body, in and out the body, around the body, and in the room where you do the practice. And it's like it blocks your awareness, so that you think you remove things from people and from yourself or from the room, but actually they stay there. They get kind of covered in this psychic fog, and they will keep doing whatever they are doing. And even worse, they will start draining your life force that God has given you. They'll drain that out of you, because these beings are not meant to be there in the first place, but they need to be fed, so they will feed on your energies. And so that was the first thing, which kind of shocked me and made me think, right. The next thing that I had is when people came to me for shiatsu who had either practicing Reiki or received Reiki from other people. When I prayed to God and to Jesus Christ to be with me and let me work on the people, all this Reiki energy, I felt it was the same dark, foreboding theme to it. It sticks to you. When people say, when you do the Reiki training, I had as well when I many, many years ago, in the early 20s, because I thought that was good. It is not true that the energy comes to you, does what it does, and then it leaves. No, it stays and sticks to you. And it's an energy, it's like an energy that all living things use. Also, not forgetting, witches and black magicians, they all use that. It's like a kind of like a universal dead energy that can be used. It is, I would call it a second-hand energy. And that too drains your true life force, your true living life force out of you, which is why people often say you can't do more than so and so many people in a day with Reiki, because it tires you. Well, it tires you because it drains your life force out of you. Whereas if you work with God, the true living life, and ask for the true living life force, the Holy Spirit, to be with you, it's alive, it's bouncy, it knows exactly what to do, it flows through you, and it does actually also step aside if you ask it to, or it, it's just there how much you need it. It has a very welcoming, cheerful presence that offers itself to you. Whereas if you work with Reiki, it is something that you call on, it seems to do what you want to do, but it actually starts taking control over you. The symbols that people draw about themselves, you can forget it, they have no protection. With God touches them, they get destroyed immediately, and that's it. And again, the Reiki actually draws in lots of dirt, and it's not something that I want to dabble with ever again. But then, yeah. The next thing that I experienced in that center, I had a lady who came to me for shiatsu. She had done some. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell me when she came to me first. She had some tarot card reading done, and these tarot cards were not the traditional ones, but they had on them pictures of vegetables and animals. I don't know, like there was a fox and the corn and the cob and other things, and I saw those in her energy field. I thought, oh, what is that stuff? And then she told me she had a tarot card reading, and I thought, oh, so what actually happens is that these symbols of the tarot cards stick in your energy, and they're connected to whatever beings are using the cards to manipulate or guide or, you know, nudge the reading along. And these are not the good beings who do that. They have their own agendas, their own interests, and they often lie to you as well. So, anyways, and they open you to realms you don't really want to be opened to, especially when you are not with God. So, with me touching her, with the presence of Jesus Christ and God, all of these things were destroyed and removed from her. But that was again another surprising experience. So, oh, and another one was when I was at the center, I listened. I don't know what I was sitting in a talk or something, and there was the shaman next door who did some ceremony with a guy. I don't know what he was doing, soul retrieval or God knows what, but he had this. So I asked God to show me while I was supposedly listening to this talk what actually is happening. And that spirit that he called in, there were two things. There was one thing which was like a thought form. That means it wasn't even a real spirit. It was a thought form, is just saying in a very quick way. It's something, it's shaped, it is a form that is made by people's thoughts and intentions. And you charge it with energy and it does whatever, and it grows over time and blah blah blah. But then there was a spirit there, but it was a very, very evil thing that I would not want to touch now. And he was working and giving therapy to that person. Let's call it therapy for now. I don't know what he was doing. Who was lying there completely opened and trusting. So that is something I only became aware of when walking with God. Because, in my younger years, I had also experienced shamanic things, and I had never thought about it a second. I had never deeper thought about it when you talk about totem animals and all of that. And so my journey with God started opening me up for the truth of all of these things, that people surround themselves with, believing that they're doing something good for themselves and for others. And you can only experience and know that when you are walking with God. And even some Christians who nowadays get into all kinds of weird things, like churches where they offer tarot cards, and some Christians who go to shamanic things, and you think, oh, well, but they're Christians, how can they? Well, they may do, because they never felt God's presence truly. So they say, that they may be Christians, but actually deep inside, they have not got that thirst-quenching presence of God. They haven't felt that from the priests, they haven't felt that from the pastors, and they have not connected truly to God themselves, and that's why they often get drawn to these things as well. So these are my experiences I wanted to talk about with God in my first years.